everyone. Good evening. Good evening. Thank you so much for coming by for another stream of the Glimmer Cast, episode 6. And tonight we will be discussing Gotti 2018, the cinematic classic with huge quotation marks around it. And it's one of my guilty pleasure mob flicks for sure. So I'm stoked and honored to be having favorite of the channel, Zodwriter. Welcome back to the show. And yeah, no, of course. Thank you for coming on. And then we have a very special guest, Devin from Olde Nerdcast, joining us for the first time. How are you, Devin?
I'm good. I'm excited to talk about this weird movie.
Yes, I'm gonna be sorry if my obnoxious laugh is even more like pronounced during this episode, because this is one of my personal hobbies outside of gaming and like other weird interests that I have, is like watching terrible movies and finding people to talk about them with me on the internet. So y'all will be subjected to that tonight, unfortunately.
Well, I actually started all of my content creation so-called career by reviewing bad movies. So this is right up my alley.
Yes, I'm so excited. And yeah, I'm going to go ahead and toss it over to Zod. Yeah, and I want to hear more about, your interest in the mob movie genre and some quick thoughts on the film before we dive into the meat and potatoes of it.
Well, I've loved mob movies my whole life. I mean, I got to be honest with you. My favorites since I was a kid were the Godfather movies. One of my prized possessions in my whole life was when the Godfather trilogy was released on DVD for the first time, and my parents got it for me as a Christmas gift. And to this day, it is still one of my. I mean, there are better versions and better transfers to watch now because we live in an HD 4K world, but that box set is always going to be special to me. It was a Christmas gift, and it actually, it's one of those things where you never get tired of watching those movies. And it's great that we're here going to talk about the John Travolta version of Gotti, because my favorite mob movie of all time is the HBO Armand Assante version of Gotti.
I didn't know this was a thing.
That was released in 1996. That is my favorite mob movie of all time. I like that even more than The Godfather, only because I feel like it's so true to the events based on accounts from real people who were there. It's very true to the to the time, and actually I feel like it covers the story in a very biographical way, whereas other movies do not. So yeah, I'm really super excited to be here, and this is a fun topic. Rhea, you picked a good one, and this is awesome.
Yeah, no, this is pretty much like a test sort of stream to see how these conversations go around the mob movie genre. And I also have a strong interest, like I mentioned, in bad movies too, so I figured it'll be a double whammy to
bad movies are always fun to talk about. I mean, who doesn't like talking about bad movies? I love it. It's great.
There's plenty of bad mob movies as well, and they're all available for free online, as I've discovered in the last year. So this is another fun sort of spin-off show.
You still got to watch Casino though, because you said you hadn't watched that one yet.
An actual good movie, an actual good mob movie. Yes, I definitely will. It's on my list. But yeah, jumping over to Devin from Olde Nerdcast. What's up, Devin? What is your interest or knowledge in the mob movie genre, and some initial thoughts around the movie?
Well, it's kind of funny because I kind of come from the polar opposite area, and where I don't really like mob movies. Like, so many of them seem like they're just bad copies of one another. So every time I watch it, it's like, did I see this already? Like, I could have sworn every mob movie, and this one has it too. They all have the scene where the guy is like, we gotta get the 5 boroughs, the Bronx and the Queens, and they make the fist, and it's like, I thought I saw this like 20 times before already.
The Last Don.
Yeah. So like, but I do have a little bit of an interest in that. I like seeing other people's kind of portrayals of like that very particular era of 70s to 80s New York, Gambino crime family kind of a style and attire and all that. So I do have a little bit of an interest in it. But what drew me to this movie initially was just the weird story about like how it was funded and why it came to exist. So like, and then John Travolta, you know, in the title role. So that's really what kind of sucked me into this whole thing.
Yeah, no, I'm so glad that you brought that up, because this was actually funded by MoviePass, as I've learned from different YouTube coverage on this movie, and then some deep diving into it too. So that's kind of like one of the things that kind of pushed it over the hump.
It went through many different funding sources over time. This is why it took so long to get made. I mean, so many companies literally dropped in and dropped out. And I'm surprised MoviePass stuck around, to be honest.
Yeah, I know that Joe Pesci was attached to it for a while too. Like, he was supposed to play Angelo Ruggiero, I think, who's Gotti's best friend in the movie.
He gained weight for the role. Gained weight for the role. Then they tried to recast him, which is cruel. That's really cruel to do to someone.
Yeah.
Oh, Zod, what were you about to say on that?
No, I know. I was going to say at one point they had a really high profile director attached to it too. I can't remember if it was Scorsese or somebody else, but it was somebody of that ilk that they were going after for it. It might have even been Francis Ford Coppola at one point. I can't remember who, but there was a big name attached to direct initially when the project first got announced.
It says Barry Levinson is who was initially
there was somebody. I remember hearing his name, but there was somebody even bigger too. But this has gone through so many different things, and I'll never understand why, considering the movie that already exists on this very topic.
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, this ended up being directed by one of the actors from the show Entourage, right? I'm not familiar with that show or this actor's, caliber of directing skills or anything he's done outside of Gotti. But yeah, I just thought that was interesting. I was expecting some more stylistic, similarities to the show Entourage, at least from my familiarity.
It was directed by Kevin Connolly.
Yes, that's his name. Yeah. Okay.
I'm sorry, I've never really watched Entourage all that much. Who was he in that? Are you familiar with who?
I'm not an Entourage guy either, so I don't know.
Yeah, no, it was basically kind of to Zod's point, just dropped down the ladder of various production hells or various levels of production hell, and then it eventually was pushed out into the world by MoviePass, and it was right when MoviePass was about to flop or die out or become no longer accepted at movie theaters.
Right, they did their made for TV movie, and that got them kicked out of the club.
Yeah, no, there's so much interesting lore surrounding this movie, on top of my own personal quote unquote investigation into what kind of skewed the storytelling of this movie. Before we dive into it, just to kind of set the stage, this movie was heavily influenced by the Gotti family, as far as the accounts.
Oh, you don't say.
Yes.
John Gotti Jr., who is a main character in the movie, who's still with us, and has published an autobiography. That was him and John Travolta were like this during the production. So, and some of the actors too are also good friends in real life with John Gotti Jr. too. So their portrayals of a lot of the characters and some of the details omitted, I found to be really interesting, considering to Zod's reference to the 1996 Gotti movie, which it does not pull any punches when it comes to negative and positive portrayals of all the characters in the movie. This movie, John Gotti 2018, is very much skewed to lean more on the positive aspects. Would y'all agree?
Oh yeah, it's basically a giant almost infomercial promoting the Gotti family. It starts off the movie starts off very oddly, John Travolta, as Gotti, is talking directly to the camera like in one of those old Katz's Deli commercials. And I'm like, what is going on here? He's being all sassy, and I'm like, okay, so he the opening scene is really what sets the tone for the movie. So is the tone of this is that we're going to be following this wacky, this wacky, affable,
Yes,
lovable.
wacky and affable. That's a perfect way to describe him.
It was
Yeah.
he was really hamming it up, is what I'm trying to say, as far as like, doing his best, Gotti impression that he's been working on for all these years. He's like, this movie's finally getting made. I gotta, do it big. And I think by the time that this movie, came out, there like at least like for me, as someone who like did not necessarily grow up watching a lot of gangster movies, I started watching them and appreciating them within the last few years. Pop culture had kind of, satirized, the idea of like a mobster and gangster so much in my head that all I was personally able to see was a parody in John Travolta's performance. I don't know if that was the same for y'all, or if you were able to give it some points.
Fully agree. It felt like a parody. It might as well have been a Saturday Night Live skit in the way that it comes off, especially, perfect example, Nerdcast that you brought up about the beginning and how it's being introduced like an infomercial. I mean, honestly, his portrayal couldn't have been more hammy. Even it almost, and it's so funny because, for those out there who are old and can remember, John Travolta did a TV show back in his early days as an actor called Welcome Back, Kotter. And on Welcome Back, Kotter, he played a young Italian, kind of a student, like punk type character named Vinnie Bopperino. And this felt like a hammed up version of this. Felt like Vinnie Bopperino all grown up as a father, as a mobster, that he'd finally made his way. I actually would have loved it if they would have taken this and made like a gritty not a remake, but a gritty like continuation of Welcome Back, Kotter.
So this is his Welcome Back Kotter character.
Teaching the students, yes, teaching his students about mob history, because that's what I thought about when I first saw the opening scene. That's what came to my mind.
That would have been a better movie, probably.
Yeah.
I will say, I'll just say this: like midway through the movie, I forget which scene it was. I'll be perfectly honest with you. Like, there were some points in this movie where I just flat out dozed off, and then I woke up and then something weird was going on, and like
it took me a few times.
Yeah,
a few times to get through it, and don't eat something really, really heavy before you start watching this movie, or you will knock out, guaranteed.
I ate a bunch of Thai fried rice, and it's really cold here, so it was kind of chilly, and I was just sitting there trying to watch it, just dozing off. But
what's so funny is
that, just say real quick though, there were some points in the movie where I was watching John Travolta and I was thinking to myself, it seems like with a little bit better direction, he could have probably pulled this role off a little bit more believably. Like, I saw bits and pieces of like some acting chops in there, and there's a reason why we know who John Travolta is. Like, he has it in him when he's given good material and good direction. But like, I saw little hints of it here and there. It's like, okay, he's really trying. Like, he's not phoning this in. This isn't like a cash grab for him. This is like, it might even be a passion project of his. Like, I could see some of that coming through here and there, but like,
he needed a better director. He needed a real director. He needed Scorsese. He needed Francis Ford Coppola. He needed somebody with some chops that could have pulled it out of him, because I agree 100% with you. He has it in him as an actor. It came off hammy because of the people behind the movie, because of the people behind the camera, because of his, and I honestly think, and this is just my opinion, that his friendship and love towards the Gotti family hurt his portrayal, because he didn't want to take it to that level, because he knew there's positives and negatives, and he didn't really want to go there. He didn't want to go that far, because he wanted to portray, you could tell he wanted to portray Gotti in more of a positive way, and they wanted to focus more on Gotti the father, not Gotti the gangster. So there's a lot of things that could have been different if he didn't know the family on the intimate level that he got to know them over the course of this whole project being greenlit.
I totally agree, Zod. Like, there are a number of times that I could like think of the scenes in my head. Like, for example, when the character John Gotti Sr. is speaking with Neil Delacroix, like right before Neil passes away, and Gotti is like, getting Neil's advice about how to murder Big Paul Castellano, who, because of my outer knowledge of, the Gotti saga, like I had to kind of like tell the story myself because the movie refused to tell me these details. It's like in the story, so I'm trying to paint the picture for y'all. So
you did your homework.
Yeah, I did my homework. I'm very fascinated with the lore outside of the movie. But anyway, yeah, he's getting his mentors, advice about how to take out the current boss after his mentor passes away. And there are just, like I mentioned, like a number of times where he's breaking his accent. Like he can do a pretty like gravelly, very like, deep accent that is somewhat parallel to, what Gotti may have sounded like or other impressions of Gotti. But then he goes back to sounding just like John Travolta, like when he elevates his voice or when he's, emoting. So like when he's talking about, Big Paul didn't earn his merits. You got to, like break your bones like we did. And like, that's when, that's the scene where I could like notice like, yeah, he's John Travolta's voice is like coming out more in his performance than his impression of Gotti.
It came out a lot when he was sick too. When he played sick Gotti, he came out. A lot of the John Travolta came out. It reminded me of, other John Travolta movies like Phenomenon and Michael. Like they try, he was, a lot of the warm aspects of the actor were being emoted through his portrayal. And a question I have for you guys: do either of you feel like, and this is something I gotta say before I forget about it, but do either of you guys feel like this movie went out of its way not to retread a lot of the ground that was already covered by the 1996 movie? Because I felt like there were a lot of things that this movie purposely stayed away from. Like you just brought up the conversation on the deathbed between Neil and Gotti. That final conversation was never, really depicted. So I feel like they tried to steer away from stuff that were so on the nose from the other movie.
As someone who rewatches the 1996 Gotti movie as well, I can definitely agree with you, Zod, that I think some key examples I can think of, like the differences between the 96 movie and the 2018 movie. The 96 movie isn't afraid to draw parallels between like the hypocrisy of Gotti's actions versus, what he preaches. Like he doesn't practice what he preaches, basically about, oh, we have the rules in order to protect the family. He'll externally say that, but he won't practice it through his actions.
He never believed in it. Clearly,
he never acted on like, what he spoke, and he expected everyone else to sort of, follow suit, never think that anyone would ever, cross him. And, he always figured that his, bravado and his pride would, sustain the loyalty of his family and his crew. But ultimately that did not happen in either movie. So, yeah.
Yeah, I never saw the 96 Gotti movie, so I wasn't.
Oh, wow. It is fantastic.
I think I'm probably the target demo for this Gotti movie, in that because I don't know like the ins and outs of his history, like they could present to me like a clearly whitewashed version of like his history and expect me to just absorb it as it is and be like, oh, that Gotti, he wasn't that bad. He had the community behind him. He was doing some good stuff. The government set him up. I mean, they're the big bad guys in all of this and all of that other sort of stuff. But even not knowing that prior knowledge, you could tell that there was some tremendous gaps in the story particularly around, how he goes to prison. I'm still, maybe I dozed off, but I still can't quite recall how he ended up actually going to prison.
Oh yeah, so like just to kind of like jump back to right after the intro scene where he's doing his best, hammy impression of Gotti against the Brooklyn Bridge, we then go to where he is introduced as like a man in like his 30s or so, with terrible makeup. He does not look like he's in his 30s, but he's speaking to the current boss, who was I forget his name. Gambino. Yeah, that's that, like literally like who the family is named after, and his mentor Neil. And Neil is giving him the directions to go and put a hit out on someone who killed a Gambino, like blood family member, not just like a crime associate, but like an actual like blood relative of Gambino. So that's like the first time that like Gotti, is shown, doing a criminal act and then eventually being sent to prison. But God, you look like you're about to say something.
Nope. No. I'm paying attention to you.
Okay, I just want to make sure I'm recapping the situation there. So that was like his first jail stint. I think it was like one of two like concurrent jail stints there. And what I wish would have happened was that there was like more context, because so like Devin, to your point, like coming in with like fresh eyes on the story and just accepting the movie for what it is without any like actual like without like a whole lot of like historical context about what actually happened outside of what the movie is telling you. I'm sitting there thinking like, well, why aren't you like, explaining more about, like Gotti's, childhood and how he met, Victoria, his wife, and, how he became who he is, instead of just jumping into like who he is as this like super prideful, arrogant, Gotti figure.
I guess they started off with how he became a made man, right? Like, I guess that's
yeah, that's pretty much how he got made, was doing the hit for the boss.
Which, by the way,
Carlo
I have a question. Why did they play music from Shaft during that scene?
Yes, it's so jarring. Yes, it full on celebrates him just like going through like these backdoors channels, being supported by the prison to go out and do a hit and then come back and finish his original prison stint.
Yeah,
bad creative choice. That's all I could say. Because it really was another thing that took you out of the movie. It was one of those things where you're just like, what am I watching? Whereas again, we can draw like a line to the 1996 movie, how that movie used music so perfectly and so cleverly. All the music there's a scene in Gotti 1996, not to spoil it for anybody. There's a scene where Gotti goes into the bathroom and the FBI visits him while he's in the bathroom, and in the background you can hear this 1980s music playing. The actual song was called Dance Hall Days, and you could hear it playing. And it was used in one of the most brilliant ways that you could possibly imagine, the way music connects these scenes. And then you flash forward to this 2018 Gotti movie, and you hear the Shaft theme, where things are supposed to be serious. You're supposed to be taking this seriously. It's supposed to be a tense moment. It's an important moment for Gotti's growth. But it's just played for humor, in my opinion. I laughed.
Yeah, I did too. It's a dark moment too. Like, he murders a man, and they have they have a close up of the dude in the bathtub with like blood everywhere and the gunshot wounds and all of that. And it's like, what is happening here? Like, why are you detracting?
I wonder what the director thought of this. I wonder if this was something that the Gotti family wanted him to put in there. I have to wonder like what the decisions were for certain shots. It'd be nice to talk to the director of this movie to find out what some of the thought processes were for some of these decisions, because it's jarring, really.
Yeah, like what was really confusing to me was that oftentimes in better mob movies, there isn't any sort of celebration of the acts being portrayed on screen. It's either ambiguous or it's very clearly being denounced. whether it be like through, the cinematography or the music, or like, the acting, whatever. But in this movie, a lot of the, really like unsavory things, that, especially like this scene that we're describing, where he breaks out of prison, or not breaks out of prison, he is allowed to go out, and then conducts the hit, and then comes back to finish his prison stint. That's all, portrayed in like a glamorous light, like, and that's what the music, at least in my point of view, kind of did. It sort of like celebrated it, like, oh, he's a hero, like Shaft is a hero, like,
He
on his show.
performed a public service.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Oh, there was like a whole sequence in the movie at some point where like there's this crazy montage of, I think it was right after Gotti gets named the head of the Gambino family. It's like this celebrity montage where it's like, oh, he's this like action star now, where all of a sudden everyone loves him, like this bouncy music. I forget which song was playing, but it was like some kind of bouncy track. A lot of the music, I feel, was trying to make the movie seem like younger and hipper and cooler, and like, this is a cool gangster movie. This isn't like a real dark portrayal of like a man's grisly life. Like, no, this is cool and hip. It's like all the kids that have Scarface posters on their wall and dream about being mobsters. They're gonna
have Gotti posters.
Yeah, they have
on their
Gotti
wall.
posters.
Yeah.
I feel like that's what it was really going for.
Like, yeah, since we're talking about like good music examples from other movies and jarring choices of music, I guess we could talk about the elephant in the room, which is like the Pitbull, like soundtrack throughout the various, super out of like, left field choices, where like periodically, like in time, this music would not exist. So why is it used to set the atmosphere of the scene?
They couldn't get the rights to any of the 80s music because the movie was so bad. They couldn't get anything that actually matched up with what the timing was or anything like that. Whereas in 1996, you actually had music appropriation that felt important to the scenes that they were showing.
Well, at the very end, I think the one music track that I thought actually kind of fit was, I think they were playing "Land of the Rising Sun" when Gotti died, and I thought that was probably the most thematically matching kind of moment of the movie. Like, and whenever I watch a movie that just like pours out a bunch of licensed music tracks and sprinkles it throughout, I always kind of have this vibe of, okay, so this movie doesn't really have a lot of substance. It's like an MTV movie where they're just kind of putting out music and trying to keep people like strung along by, oh, remember this song?
People
oh, remember that song? Yeah, exactly. And I kind of got a little bit of that vibe from this movie with all of those weird songs. But like that one song at the end was like, oh, okay, this one actually kind of sort of matches the tone and like what's happening on screen. If it matched up a little bit better throughout the movie, maybe that would have made it a little bit more palatable. But for most of the song choices, they were just absolutely bizarre. And it does set the tone right at the beginning with that Shaft song. And like, that's the first song you hear. It's like,
yes,
that's the first song we're hearing.
Yeah, totally. There's one, I will give some points to this movie that I did actually think it did well. So like there's a club scene where Gotti and his mentor Neil are in the club, and they're kind of, pointing to different, important characters who we'll see more of later in the movie, like Sammy Gravano and Frank DiCiccio, I think, like is also in there. Like I'm probably naming names that are super unimportant to the people who watch this movie because, or unless like you actually know like the history. But yeah, these are important figures in the movie later on. And Gas Pipe Casso, one of my favorite
the one that we
gangsters in history,
should have his own film.
I agree.
It should be grisly, dark, and awesome.
Yes.
I mean, I don't know why that hasn't happened yet, but
really, I'm not familiar with this character.
Oh yeah, he is the scenes with him I felt like were very like dark and like very like menacing, very much on brand with him as like this figure in history, because like he was like a sociopath, he was a serial killer, he was menacing, he really like him having this guy chained up in the basement, shooting him like in various body parts until like the poor guy was like, suffering so much he just, blurted out the name of the person who put him up to to shooting a gas pipe than putting that guy out of his misery. Like that's very much like true to what happened. And the cops working with a gas pipe in order to, you know, bring victims to him to be, you know, terrorized in order to give information and then ultimately killed. Like that's all true. So that's kind of like, in a weird way, I do want to see that movie because it's kind of like not really like a slasher movie, but more just like kind of like
almost like a Silence of the Lambs kind of thing.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. But yeah, going back to the club scene. So they're playing Heart of Glass by Blondie, and I felt like that was kind of a good example where I could have totally seen that in, you know, another gangster movie, if not the Gotti 1996 movie. Like that's a licensed song. Like to Devin's point, like, you know, sometimes licensed music can be overdone, and then it could like kind of make the movie feel too commercial and too, you know, like too much like an MTV sort of, you know, like type of vibe. But I felt like it made sense because the atmosphere was, you know, the late 70s, early 80s, probably like the early 80s. So that song made sense to be playing during that time. It was a club setting. And like the themes of, you know, Heart of Glass, like, you know, seeing all the people who will ultimately, you know, like betray John Gotti in the future. And he's just sort of like pointing out why he doesn't necessarily, you know, find them to be favorable people in that moment. So there's sort of like an irony there, like having like the music play as well, just, you know, sort of foreshadowing events to come. So that's some, you know, clever filmmaking I will give some points to this movie for.
All right. Wow, Gotti scored some points.
Also, too, the family aspect of Gotti and his son. There were a lot of good scenes between father and son in this movie. They tried to focus a lot on that, and we know why, because John Gotti Jr. Was involved behind the scenes. So you know, I think that those scenes were probably the most authentic scenes in the film.
I get that sense too, and I think that, you know, the actor who played his son, I think he did a good job, and I think that John Travolta was probably at his best in this movie when he was sharing screen time with him. I think that was probably the most developed aspect of this movie, and it's kind of a shame because it wasn't it wasn't like the main focus of the movie, in my view. Like they talked about, you know, he talked to his son a lot while he's in jail and whatnot, but there's so much of the movie that like takes focus away from what the son's doing. Like the son goes off at some point. I guess he goes to the military, I think, and then like he comes back at some point. So like for I know they put the timestamps on the screen, but the timeline jumping still seemed a little bit mysterious to me at certain points. So I was kind of it also, you know, this could have been just a function of me nodding off here and there, but it just seemed like some of the connective tissue for the narrative was tenuous at best, and I couldn't be bothered to like care too much about that unless it was scenes where he was really like having an emotional moment with like his son and shit. Like I said, he walks in, there was like a bar fight or whatever, and they kill a dude. And like he storms in and starts slapping the shit out of all of them. Like that was like a compelling scene. I was like, wow, like I'm actually enthralled by a scene from this movie. Like this is interesting. Like, and it was a good moment, but there just wasn't a whole lot of that. Like I would have liked for there to have been more of that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Like the moments where John Gotti Jr., the son character, were actually starting to show signs of, you know, regressing into that darker lifestyle that his family putting him in military school and sending him off to, you know, be away from, you know, being around his father's, you know, business, crime business or whatever.
The makings of Michael from The Godfather.
Yes, exactly. Like great point, Zod. Those are like, that's a really great parallel because like Michael Corleone in Godfather went off to, you know, the military to kind of, you know, try to become just like a regular standard, you know, American citizen. And just when he comes back, he's then compelled to, you know, join the family business. But in Gotti 2018, it's not necessarily that John Gotti Jr. is compelled to join the business. It's just that like he can't really get away from it. Like anytime he, you know, is around, you know, his classmates or whatever in military school, the TV is reminding him of his dad, you know, being in court or being arrested for various activities with the Gambino crime family, and he then gets suspended from military school because of a fight for trying to defend members of the crime family. So he can never really escape it. So it's not necessarily like his father is dying and he needs to take over the family. It's just that he sort of is realizing that it's this way of life is always going to be around him, so he wants to just jump into it.
It's kind of ironic how he eventually does become like that. He basically does fall into that role. It's amazing, because it seemed like in his instance, he really did want to be away from it. He really did want to do other things. He really did seem, on a different path. And that's where, like, I see a lot of similarities between, him and Michael from The Godfather. Like, it just, because ultimately too, Michael had a lot of, you remember how Michael really was resistant to almost every aspect of it. I mean, he was a dreamer. He just wanted to go off and be with a woman and just do his own thing and not want to have nothing to do with it. He wasn't like he was, it wasn't like it was very compelling to him either. So it's nice to look at reality and, kind of compare it to a fictional world where in reality, there's a lot of really cool parallels. It's interesting.
Yeah, I would say that the one thing that kind of stomps on that a little bit is the tone of the movie. Like, so I understand, we all understand, just by knowing a little bit about what the realities of mob life is like, that there is a reason why someone would not want to be conscripted into the mob life at a young age. Like, we
Right.
get that. But because the movie went out of its way to try to portray the Gotti family in a positive light, because they didn't want to show any of like the darkness of John Gotti as a mobster, as a killer, and as a ruthless person, because they wanted to like push all of that aside, it made it seem like, well, I don't get why this kid wouldn't want to be involved in the mob life.
Right.
You know?
Why wouldn't he want to be like his dad? Why
It
wouldn't
seems like
he
it
want
might
to
be
be?
kind of awesome.
He'll be a hero too, and they'll be having shaft music and parades for him. It'll be
I know,
awesome.
everyone's in the streets with signs. They're all like fucking rallying to him. Everyone's having a great time. Like, why wouldn't you want to be a part of this? Like, okay, yeah, it's a little violent here and there, but you never really see, like, other than like a couple of courtroom scenes, you don't really see like any real human ramifications of violence.
Courtrooms and corpses, no big deal.
Exactly. You kill a guy and then you just party to the Shaft song and then go back to jail and everything's just fine. It's no problems at all. And it's like, well, there's a lot that goes into, like, especially if he's a young dude. Like, he killed a guy at a bar, and or at least was a part of that, and there was no like, holy, we did murder. We did a murder, and now we have this weighing on our conscience. Like, it feels like I am being inextricably sucked into this world now. I can't escape it. I've already got blood on my hands.
It's like he told the police officer in the 1996 movie, just make sure, and I'm paraphrasing here, just make sure you hit the right guy. This way it looks like you performed a public service.
Yeah, no, that's kind of like the light that mobsters, at least in these movies, were looked at, as far as like, being community figures and, doing public services, like Zod was saying. I think like some parallels that I'm thinking of right now are like when Junior, he's in this bar with his friends and he gets into a bar fight with this random dude who, is trying to get him and his friends to take shots with him. So when the guy just refuses to, get away from John Jr. and his friends, he just starts, wailing on this guy. And there are, some like innocent bystanders who also get hurt, and then one of them gets killed in the bar fight. And it just sort of drew a parallel to like near the beginning of the movie when Gotti Sr. went out on his first hit to kill McBratney for the boss Gambino at the time, like in the 70s, before he did his first jail stint.
The one who killed Gambino's, I believe it was his nephew, that was
Yeah,
killed.
yeah. He threw his body in the effing dumpster, or at least like that's what Neil said.
Blew his face off and threw him in the dumpster. Remember? Yeah.
And I'm just like, this is so morbid and terrible, but like the way that they're, like delivering this information just comes off as comedic and like, like it doesn't have that impact that it should. So I'm like, am I getting desensitized or are they desensitized?
No, they're desensitizing you because it's psychological. It's like putting endorphins in a club-like atmosphere to keep you awake and keep you oxygenated so you can continue to party. That it's totally to give you all the positive and happy vibes that you can have, the most positive happy vibes you can have watching what's supposed to be a mobster movie.
I remember, this is kind of like a quick aside that has really very little to do with the movie, but I remember a while ago, I was watching Sopranos, and I forget what was going on, but they were like sawing up a body in a bathtub, and they were just having a casual conversation at the same time, and it was like one of the darkest scenes I've ever seen in my life, and it just depressed me so much watching that episode. That was the only episode of Sopranos I watched. I just watched it at random, and I was like, "Oh, this is so brutal." I mean, I can tell it's a great show, but it is so dark, and that was just so like disturbing to see that I don't know if I could stick around and watch more of this show. But
Sopranos wasn't afraid to go there, and they did it so beautifully too. I mean, it was just amazing.
Yeah,
I would definitely recommend that show for sure. I'm a big fan, and The Many Saints of New York is another bad mob movie that I'll be happy to dissect in the future too.
The Many Saints of New York.
The Newark.
Okay.
Yeah. But jumping back to Gotti 2018, some additional sort of things I wanted to call out were, the portrayal of, Victoria, who is played by Kelly Preston, who unfortunately passed away recently. And forgive me because I'm going to be a little, more forgiving to her performance, just because, I'm like, it makes me a little sad watching that, seeing that that's like her final, cinematic performance, I think. But just to kind of like do some criticism of her performance, it does come off as like over the top and campy as well, because Victoria Gotti is of Jewish descent and Italian descent, so she just has this very like stereotypical East Coast New Yorker, very like elevated accent as well. Like in fact, I think she's more consistent in her performance than John was as Gotti. Would y'all agree?
Yes.
I would say so. Yeah,
I was just amazed that Travolta's wife played this role. That fascinated me. I was just, when I saw that, I was like, wow, this is unbelievable, because she really, from what I know of Victoria Gotti, she doesn't embody that person at all. I don't know. She just doesn't strike me as Victoria Gotti. So I kind of felt like it was miscast, but I was forgiving in the sense that, yeah, it's Travolta's wife and they wanted some sort of chemistry, and the way they hammed it up together, there were some scenes that were okay, but not great. So
yeah. I think something that I could be wrong, but I think you're talking about like in real life, Victoria Gotti is not like very like feminine and emotionally
right.
Like
she's got a very tough exterior, and she's really I mean, I'm sure she's emotional and soft with her husband in certain instances, but on the outside, no, she's a lot tougher than she was portrayed in this film.
Yeah, no, kind of like segueing to her performance after their son was unfortunately killed in the car accident. Yeah, that's sort of like when I think that really like spotlit or really highlighted her performance for me, in terms of like how she was able to sort of like physically act out, like the loss of her in movie son, like just like the lamenting and like the downward mental spiral that she was going through. I do think that maybe some of the sobbing scenes were a little over the top, but perhaps that might have been on purpose. Maybe like that is more true to, you know, what actually happened in real life, and maybe it just didn't transfer that well cinematically. But yeah, that's just another part of the movie that I actually really enjoyed, that, you know, they actually got into the aspects of loss that the Gotti family suffered. Like they lost um they lost their child. They lost Gotti lost like his best friend to cancer, Angelo Ruggiero, after he was put on the shelf, you know, basically retired from the family. And he lost his mentor slash father figure, Neil Delacroce. Um, and yeah, there was just a long list. Oh, and like various friends, like, you know, backstabbing him throughout the movie and selling him out. Willie Boy Johnson, the Native American and Italian crime associate who was, you know, ratting him out to the government like for almost 20 years. Yeah, that was just, you know, a number of losses that Gotti suffered throughout the movie. So so at least I appreciate the movie going into depth on that. It's just that, again, like it kind of failed a little bit because I'm going in with the luxury of knowledge about details around who these characters are and why they're important. But as a movie watcher, none of that is really given to you.
Not at all. Not at all. It would have been nice to know that, but I guess for the purposes of what this movie was trying to do, it wasn't necessary to know.
Watch the 1996 movie.
Oh,
You'll be filled in. You'll feel a little better.
I'll add it to my list.
It's a great movie for sure, and I'm shocked that, you know, HBO movies like that existed, like with that, you know, level of quality and care put into the presentation. So it's one that I watch frequently, and it's on YouTube, uncensored too, in HD. So that's where I watch it a lot of the time. But yeah, Zod, any like scene callouts or, you know, performances, good or bad, that you want to, you know, dive into?
Well, like I said, I loved the relationship between Gotti and his son, particularly John Gotti Jr. in this movie. I thought that if the movie, honestly, if the movie would have been called My Father Gotti or Gotti and Son or something like that, and focused mainly on the relationship between those two throughout, I think it would have been a better movie, and I think it would have been a better approach, especially considering how they went for the stylized fantasy approach of John Gotti being essentially like a superhero or like a neighborhood superstar, or the whole glamorizing MTV-ism that they went for with this movie. And I just think if they would have just told it from the perspective of his son and had it be more about that relationship, it probably would have been better.
Yeah, that makes that makes some sense too, because like if it was more focused on the father-son dynamic from like the point of view of the son, then you would understand why you would be looking at it from a lens of glamour. Like, oh, this is a glamorous lifestyle.
Yes.
Oh, this is a glamorous, larger than life man. Of course,
how he sees his father.
Yeah, how he sees his father. That would basically be the lens with which you would be portraying the story, and then you could get away with having like the more controversial aspects.
The shaft theme in the beginning.
And well, I don't know if you could ever quite get away with that, but you get away with some other stuff. You know, you can get away with, you know, at least lightening up the murders.
Let's get a pizza. That's actually a line from the 1996 movie, though, too. Oh, they're sitting there having a meeting, and then at one point Daddy gets up and says, "Let's get some pizza." It's awesome. It's great.
Nice.
It's what I actually do appreciate too, though, is like the movie, whether intentionally or not, it does kind of call out that, you know, Gotti kind of, you know, has himself to blame as far as like his you know, him ultimately ending up in jail and, you know, being betrayed by, you know, his crime family, because like through his actions throughout his entire life, like he never, hid the fact that, he was a gangster. He told his son to tell anyone who had the balls to ask him what his dad did for a living, that his dad was a 24-hour, 7 days a week street guy. Like I think I'm paraphrasing a line from the movie Gotti 2018. So he also wanted his associates to do the same. Like there was one scene where an associate was like, covering his face in the newspaper, and Gotti, tracks him down and meets with him saying like, we don't hide who we are. If I see you covering your face again, I'll cover it up permanent. And just like the way that he, ran his crew, and how he operated like in the public eye, in the face of, like government, like surveillance, and, constantly being in and out of court. Like, plus they did not share in the movie that he actually paid off one of the jurors in one of the trials that he won.
At it.
Right, but
they did hint at it.
They covered that. Remember, though, they covered that in the 1996 version.
They did.
And They also, in the 1996 version, also showed a lot about how Gotti was the in-your-face, celebrity. He was called Sammy the Bull, referred to him as the celebrity gangster. He was because he was always out in the public eye, and he didn't shy away from that. That was, so that was something that both movies did a decent job trying to show that Gotti was out in your face, that he was happy to be a celebrity, he was happy to be, popular by everybody. So I mean, in that regard, I don't know. I don't think the 2018 movie did too bad of a job.
I liked how they used like footage, like that's always neat to see.
Yeah,
I actually want to get y'all's feedback on that, because the footage for me, again, I'm coming in with like the burden of knowledge of knowing that some of the things that plagued the production of this movie, to just sort of push it through the door, it kind of felt like a little bit of a cop-out, or like kind of lazy, like in the same way that you feel that pop music and movies can feel kind of, commercial and lazy. I felt like the news snippets felt like, just, trying to piece together what footage they had of John as Gotti, and then trying to tell the story at the same time, because they couldn't, go back and film anything else. I don't know if that's the vibe y'all got.
I can see why you would get that vibe for certain. I didn't get that vibe. I think that there is something interesting in telling a story about a character who seems like they were written for a movie, like Gotti, and then juxtaposing it with footage that says, no, this was a real guy, and this is some real stuff that happened, like someone was killed outside a steakhouse, there was all this other stuff that's going on. And when you look at, or at least me, when I look at the footage, I remember I think I may have watched this movie when it came out and just forgot everything about it afterwards. But I do remember like there was a period of time when like I started YouTubing news clips around it, because like I wanted to see other kind of coverage that was going on around the time. So like there was some amount of time that I was like YouTubing various local news and national news about Gotti and his arrest and trial and all that sort of stuff, and like seeing what the protests actually look like and all that sort of stuff.
Did you listen to the phone call? Did you listen to the phone call that he had?
I don't think I did.
From jail with the people that were like they were like fans of his, and they wanted to meet him. And they went to jail, and when he was in jail, he actually told them a story from the jail phone. He was like that, and it's recorded. It's on like a grainy phone camera footage, but it's actually on YouTube.
Oh,
really interesting.
I do know like a little bit about what Zod's talking about, like a lot of clippets from the government surveillance tapes, as well as prison clips of Gotti on the prison phone, like were quoted in the movie, and oftentimes in various, other Gotti movies, like some snippets about you'll never see a guy like me if you live to be 5,000. That was like a legit quote. And
okay, I'm sorry, but I gotta say though, the ending the movie the way that they did with that, like that quote's one thing, but like he's at the bridge and he does like this jaunty turnaround. He's like flipping his coat. He's like, "You'll never see another guy like me in 1,000 years." And he stomps off.
There's a very interesting parallel, and I know I keep bringing up the 1996 movie, but I love it so much. There's a very interesting parallel because that movie also begins and ends with a John Gotti monologue, but
Really?
it's done so much better, and it makes so much sense. The line at the end of the movie is 5-10 years from now they're going to miss John Gotti. And it really is, it's like a play on the whole, celebrity aspect of it, almost as if to say, John Gotti was making, the mob or crime something something entertainment for people to enjoy and for people to consume, like they do everything else in the world we live in now. And it really is a very moving portrayal, and it's done in a much more realistic and darker way. But I mean, I have to keep bringing it up because it's something it has in common with the 2018 movie, but the 2018 movie was more parody, whereas the 1996 movie actually took the material seriously from that perspective.
Like you like comparing these two Gotti movies is making me want to compare The Irishman to the Jack Nicholson Hoffa movies.
Hoffa, yes.
Oh my gosh! So
Rhea, let's do that stream. Rhea, let's do that stream.
I'll hit you up. I have to watch. Hoffa with Jack Nicholson.
Have you seen it?
No, I haven't. I love The Irishman though. Yeah.
Oh, yes.
So anyway, but yeah, that's like another idea on top of like the other ideas like I've been talking with Devin about like for future reviews and content too. But yeah, I just kind of want to give us the last few minutes to just sort of like do some closing thoughts on the movie. Like I know like we've been a little bit touch and go on like our coverage on the movie and like some of our thoughts. I think it's been a pretty fair, open-minded review. Like some of us have like given some positive thoughts and then some negative thoughts and then just some like what WTF thoughts of like why would you do this sort of thoughts. So I think yeah, so I really love this discussion. I hope to have more in the future.
Oh wait, there was one scene that just came to my mind that
really go for it.
Baffled me. So like they're having like this street party and the dude is grilling some stuff and Gotti Jr. I guess is there. And some girl walks up and he talks to me. He's like, and like they're flirting, and he's like, "Hey, do you want to go grab a beer?" And she's like, "I'm 16." He's like, "Oh, you want to go grab a soda?" I'm like, wait a second. Let's just not gloss over this "I'm 16" thing. You were in the service not too long ago, so you're at least 18, maybe 19 years old at this point. Like, what is going on with like the age difference here? Like, this seems way creepier than it probably should. Like, maybe they're trying to pass them off as, oh, these are just two kids about to go. But as soon as she's like, "I'm 16." I was like, get out of there. Like, abort. And like he still went off with her.
I get that too. And then like the associate who's grilling, he's like Joey Ruggs. So I'm just like, oh, this old creep is like, creeping on this girl. So that was the crime there for me. Like, yeah. Like, I don't even know if like how old, to the point that you were making, Devin, about like, I don't even know like what time or year it's supposed to be in this movie most of the time, because like it just jumps to whatever time it wants to be in at any given moment.
Right.
But yeah, no, that's like a really funny call out too, because like I was thinking of that as like a parallel to Godfather, Michael Corleone going off to his hometown and then meeting the love of his life, Apollonia. Like John Gotti Jr. basically found his Apollonia, like the perfect Sicilian wife who'll support his life of crime and be by his side like throughout all of his like dealings in the crime business and stuff like that. So yeah, that's a good call out too. But anyway, closing thoughts. Zod, what are some of your closing thoughts on this movie, this genre, the discussion, all of that?
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me. I love these discussions. This was perfect. Nerdcast, it was so nice meeting you, Devin. This is awesome. I as much as we kind of pick this movie apart, I didn't hate this movie, and I think that this movie would have been better received if the 1996 movie didn't exist. And just so that people know, the 1996 movie is getting a sequel. Gotti 2 is in development. It's Armando Santi is returning as John Gotti, and it's going to tell the story of how John Gotti ran things from prison all the way to his final moments before he died. So should be an interesting movie, and the fact that they got Armando Santi to come back is fantastic.
Yeah, no, I'm excited for that too. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us, Zod. I really appreciate you. Anytime you're able to make time to come on my show is always a pleasure.
All you have to do is say the word. I'll always be here, Rhea. You are awesome.
Thank you so much. And Devin from Olde Nerdcast, any closing thoughts? Anything else you want to say on this movie and our discussion?
Well, the discussion was awesome. Thank you, Zod. I had fun on this too. This was great and informative all around. Let me just ask this question to both of you, and this is probably a more appropriate question to ask you since you guys are steeped in mob films more so than I am. Would you recommend this movie to people?
I would tell them to watch the 1996.
Same. As much as Zod is drawing parallels to the 96 movie, it's deeply woven into my mind too, and I can't help but compare the two. So
let me caveat it this way. If you encountered somebody who also loved mob movies and watched the 1996 Gotti, would you recommend this one to them?
Yes, I actually would. So let's say Zod had never seen Gotti 2018. I would actually want to hear his thoughts on it. And yeah, that's just my take. Is from out of
morbid curiosity. I'd be like, you've got to watch it just to see John Travolta try to play Gotti. That would be the draw.
This is the movie for John Travolta fans. And I know we were talking about other John Travolta movies what is it? It's not called The Stalker. It's called something else where he's this obsessed fan.
Oh, The Fanatic.
The Fanatic. Yes, that's another really good, bad John Travolta movie that came out right after Gotti. That's
like a John Travolta movie that's like Nicolas Cage level bad.
Yeah,
wow.
that one's wild. Directed by Fred Durst.
Yes, there's so much fun lore around these movies that I can't wait to dive into in the future. But yeah, no, thank you so much, Devin, for coming on. Thank you, Zodwriter. You can find Zodwriter on Twitter, and links in the description to his Twitter and his YouTube channel, and also our friend Devin from Olde Nerdcast. You can find links to his Twitter and his YouTube channel in the description as well. And yeah, we are going to be wrapping it up for the Glimmercast episode 6. Thank you, everyone, for coming by, and I'll see y'all later. Okay, bye.